Daybreak, 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 the Daybreak Show.
You are giving you, let me say as it is now, Professor Patrick Utomi. Prof, you are welcome to the Daybreak Show Citizens Forum on Rock City FM this morning, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be able to join you.
Thank you so much. My own name is Paul One, as you know, and I don't think we should make any much ado about anything. The first straight question I'll ask you, Prof, is this. I have several questions. My colleague here has several questions. But let us start from the rudiments, from the basics. Sir, what is political economy?
Well, political economy is central to the living condition of man. It's about how choices are made regarding economic activity and sustaining economic growth within the context of the political realities of any environment. In reality, economics is rooted in political economy, and it's an effort to further bring two disciplines. But the harder people try, the more they find that you have to bring the two disciplines together. So essentially, the average political economist has economics education, has political science education, and whereas political science tries to focus on institution building, economics looks at markets and structures for wealth creation. But you find invariably that how you make those choices is affected by institutions. So politics and economics will always be in a mix. The narrow focus on economics takes away sometimes from understanding the role of institutions in economic performance. And in recent years, of course, central to explaining how economies perform has been the place of institutions. In fact, just this morning I was reflecting on the China story. Those who look at what happened to China, historians like the British historian Neil Ferguson, who wrote the book on Civilization, the 6 killer apps of Western power, trying to explain how the West separated from the rest of the world in terms of wealth and all of that. Focus essentially on the role that institutions have played in separating those who perform well from those who have not performed well in human history. And he talks about China and how China went to sleep for several hundreds of years because its institutions were weak. Institutions did evolve like Western institutions evolved. Now, today, we see China surge after Deng Xiaoping in 1978 carried out a series of reforms. Obviously, we see strengthening of institutions in China, but you will see that very significant in what happened to China was the role of education, human capital, and leadership. So, in my work, I wrote a book in 2006 titled "Why Nations Are Poor," and I tried to offer a framework for understanding why some countries perform well and others fail. And I thought that 6 sets of variables are critical to understand why some people do well and some people don't do well. And one is the kind of policy choices that you make. That is typically the domain of the economists. You know, open economies and markets versus controls and stuff like that. Then there are institutions, because institutions are about boundaries to behavior. That if you do this outside of this context, there's consequence and all of that. And there's human capital, which is very important in understanding what happened to China after Deng. That is equally important. If you focus on institutions without understanding human capital, the kind of emphasis that China put on education when Deng came along, you will not understand why, for example, Steve Jobs responded the way he did to the question that Barack Obama as president asked him Why are you developing the iPhone in China? And Steve Jobs said to him, look, we had a deadline. We're trying to work as fast in the deadline in the US. And there were not enough software engineers, and they were too highly priced. We turned to China, and in one small area in China, we find several times as many software engineers as we had in the US for one quarter their cost. And so it was only natural that we moved the development of the iPhone to China, and we met our deadline because of it. Look, this China we're talking about, when I was already a graduate, I was doing NYSC. China's output per capita was half of Nigeria's. Half. Today it is 30 times that of Nigeria. You know, what happened to us between 1978 and now that sent us to sleep? And China woke up so remarkably. That is one of the big questions of our time. That's why one of the reasons I will argue in whatever question you ask me today that we need to get rid of all the politicians that currently run Nigeria. They're not fit for purpose. Then, you know, you have entrepreneurship as the other variable, and the very critical variable holding all these other variables together in my framework is culture, values, because values shape human progress. You cannot be cheating everybody you see and think that business can happen. No, it won't happen because people will be too suspicious of one another to go into economic transactions. That's a value issue. Cultures, central to how progress takes place. And who determines culture? Leadership. The most important thing that leaders do is set the tone of culture. And that's why I laugh at people who don't, you know, literally it doesn't matter who is in leader. You have the kind of National Assembly you have in Nigeria, impossible to make progress. People obsessed with themselves and don't think of the people. People are dying, standard of living is dropping, inflation is killing people, you are buying more cars for yourself. That's a very central thing. You can't lead, you can't say, you're not setting the right tone for culture, and progress cannot take place in such a society. So this framework, which I call the growth drivers framework in my 2006 book, Why Nations Are Poor, flowed out of my own 1998 book, Managing Uncertainty, which focused managing uncertainty, competition and strategy in emerging economies, which focused more on the macro level, firm level, and its interface with institutions at a national level. But the growth drivers framework from 2006 looked broadly at the national economy and the major factors that drive growth and economic performance. So this is really more or less the scope I can give you that say that political economy is basically broader than economics, includes economics, but takes more into account in terms of institutions and you know, factors of politics.
Okay, before you ask a question, with all that being said, sir, how would you in explicitly describe the current political economy of Nigeria? Would you say that Nigeria, since independence, is developing as regards in the political economy sector of the country?
Well, the Nigerian political economy is a rent economy. There's people enter the economic system to extract economic rent. The obsession in Nigerian economic system today is with sharing. That's why if you look at all the arguments, constitutional reform, restructuring, to many people, restructuring means, how can you allow Niger Delta people to get 25% of the oil because it's in their backyard? No, they should get 2%, they should get 30%, they should get 20%. So we're focused obsessively on sharing. That's the rent culture. Okay? Whereas the countries that make progress are focused on production, not on revenues and sharing. We are focused on revenues and sharing. But let me tell you the folly in that consciousness.
Okay.
Let us take a part of our country to illustrate this, not because there's any problem with them. In the 1960s, the nature of the political arrangement in Nigeria was a two-tier federal structure where you had the national and the subnational. The subnational was made up of the federating units, West, East, North, well, later Midwest. And the subnational governments just decided at their convenience to create whatever number of local governments they wanted to facilitate administrative activities. And the South chose to create many more local governments than the North. Between the West, Midwest, Eastern region, there were nearly twice as many local governments as there were in the North, which was of no consequence, was an administrative convenience. By 1975-76, the Obasanjo administration, looking at some experiences in Eastern Europe and Brazil, I think, decided to embark on local government reforms, and then constitutionally brought the third tier of government into the fiscal transfer structure, so that local governments were now part of the federating arrangement, and fiscal transfers were going to local government to the tune of 20.9% of revenues in the distributable pool fund. With this arrangement, people who had power began to scramble to increase their own local government so that they can get more of these revenues, which at that time was coming principally from oil, which came from most small part of the country, the south, as it were. But they didn't have power. So people who had power were significantly military officers who were predominantly from the north. So they began to create more and more and more and more local governments in the north, until we got to where we are today, where there are 774 local governments, and nearly 500 are in the old northern region. Nearly 500. So we went from an arrangement where there were twice as many in the south as in the north to one where there are now nearly 3 times as many in the north as there are in the old south. Now, in principle, in reality, what this has meant is that since the mid-70s, the flows of federal revenues at the third level to regions of the country, there has been a huge flow of that oil money to the north. I don't have any problem with any flows. But the simple point that I want to make is that the north has become increasingly poorer as they have received more and more revenues. Why would that happen? Why would you get more money and be poorer? It's simple. Because revenues do not make rich. What makes rich is production. If you get revenues that you did not work for, the greater tendency is that you will end up suffering what is called the lottery effect. I don't know if you've seen a poor person who won the lottery.
They become poor.
Years later, they become poorer than they were when they won.
Exactly, sir.
And so it is production that makes rich. And what happened in the 50s was that the subnational governments, the Western region, obsessed with production. For example, moves to start the first industrial estate in Nigeria, in Ikeja. And the others looking at it say, only you. Okpara responded with the Trans-Amadi Industrial Layout in Port Harcourt and Aba. And Kaduna says, okay, if you want to make progress, Mr. Downer makes Kakuri in Kaduna the hub of the textile industry because the north was endowed with cotton. And textiles becomes the biggest employer of labor in the country outside of government. And you see this competition between the regions on who will outproduce the other, captured in the work of some American political scientists, Robert Melson and Howard Wolpe. It was called competitive communalism, ethnic nationality groups competing for who will most bring progress to their people. Since oil became the dominant and defining factor in Nigeria under military rule, and then we got what I like to call the dangerous alchemy of soldiers and oil. what has happened to Nigeria is that our emphasis has shifted from that obsession with production to obsession with sharing. Richard Joseph, who spent some years at UI teaching, wrote a book while in Ibadan that was titled Prebendal Politics in Nigeria. And it focused on Nigerian politics as bureaucratic prebendalism. That is, a vicar, say in the Anglican Church, hands out prebends to his assistant vicars. He support money, stipend. So in Nigeria, we all come to the center to get some stipend, some prebend from the center. And so the obsession of Nigerian politics is with prebendalism, collecting your own share of the national cake, and very little thought about who is baking this cake. Eventually, you'll find that all of you will starve because you're sharing a cake that is not being baked. So far, oil is providing the baking. And oil, we're in energy transition. Oil was always a finite resource, and we have mistreated oil, and we are paying for it right now.
Okay, sir, I would like to ask you, earlier mentioned about production and revenue. Would you say that our level of production is a factor for the setback of the political economy in Nigeria?
Absolutely. I mean, Nigeria is not producing. Not producing at all. The politicians don't care about production. They don't understand it. All they want to do is share. I mean, tell me where it is logical that your revenues can be coming down. Things are going bad everywhere. And the politicians are increasing the amount of money they're taking from the treasury. Does it even make rational sense? It costs more to run a national assembly than to run the Nigerian economy. It's madness. Nothing else can define madness better than the way our political structure runs. And it's all a function of that mindset of revenues and sharing instead of production and growing.
Now, sir, what bothers me most is this. We have 200 million people and an estimate gross domestic product of $440 billion in 2021. By this, Nigeria is Africa's most populous country and the continent's largest economy. Despite the country's potential, even from independence from Britain in 1960, and all these parameters, you as a guru in economy, and most of you that are like that, what has bogged you down? What is bogging us down from exercising our great potential in beating all these problems that you have highlighted this morning?
See, economics is a science of incentives. If the incentives are skewed, production will not take place. And let me give you a small example. I used to be quite friendly during the Babangida days with the Minister of Industry. Nice man, Air Force General, and always meant well. But one day, he was playing squash with a friend of his who's a businessman. As I play squash, he kicks the ball, bah! The friend says, AVM, your government may fall anytime from now. We say, what do you mean? Hey, people are really getting very mad about the price of vegetable oil. Crisis. Say, what happened? He said, you people have banned the importation of vegetable oil to protect the local industry so that you can have production and all of that. But the price is high and people are nearly rioting. Say, people want to survive. Better go and remove the ban on importation. After squash, the general goes, takes a shower, and goes straight to the damn barracks and goes to the president. I say, Oga, hey, our government's in trouble. Look at this. Really? The following day, they removed the ban on vegetable oil importation. What the AVM did not know is that his friend who was playing squash with him had some shipload of of vegetable oil waiting to enter Nigerian waters. Immediately they removed the ban, his thing came in. And all the manufacturers said they were going to lay off all their staff and that they can't compete. Wahala. But put the ban back. Put the ban back. Meanwhile, the man, ship have come in. He makes out like a bandit. Damages local industry. Now that's the kind of economy that we have continued to run. So the incentives have been typically against producing. There's no consistency in government policy. So you invest today, tomorrow you lose everything you have invested in your life. You go back to your village bitter, all your life's work gone. The next person comes. So after a while, nobody wants to produce. This is the kind of challenge that we have had. And that is the problem with Nigerian economy. I just give you an example of China and where they are and where we were. Just how many years ago, when I was a graduate already, I'm talking about like the stories I was told. It all happened in one generation. Look, if you look at how things have been developing, to double GDP output, it took the United States 60 years. It took Britain 50 years following on the track of the United States. It took Japan, which became a miracle story, 35 years. But it took South Korea 11 years. I am saying today that if serious-minded people take over this country, we can double output in 5 years. We can. But what's happening? We are just trudging along. We're not even growing at rates of 1.2%. This. And in fact, when oil prices crash, growth literally freezes. I mean, that cannot be the case.
That budget was announced. My friends in the media will be chasing me all over the place to come and do an analysis of the budget, be put on network news to explain the budget. I stopped doing that more than 25 years ago because I found that it was a waste of time. Because you say all those things about what can happen if this in the budget happen and that. Then in December, they'll gather everybody together. Oh, it was a great idea, the greatest budget in sliced bread. It was just poorly implemented. This is nonsense. Look, the state governor who writes a budget and has nothing about painting government house in that budget runs into a friend who says to him, alright, you're now an MTN man. He says, what do you mean? You have painted government house yellow. Does that mean MTN? He gets to the office, paint it white. No, paint it green. It's in green. And then he goes out the next week, he sees another friend, hey, you are defected to blue. This is potting. Governor, you don't pot. Yeah, really? He runs back to the office. Paint it. He has painted governor's mansion 3 times in 1 year, but there was no budget for painting governor's house at all in the budget. Now, how can you run a country like that, which is the way Nigeria is run, and then you say that the policy was poorly implemented? It is that the budget ad initio was designed as a public relations exercise. It was not intended to be implemented. South Korea got where it is by deciding on, look, we want to dominate certain value chains, play in certain fields. We want in 30 years to be dominant shipbuilder in the world, even though we can't even make boats. In getting there, we need to know what we must do. And literally speaking, you take a perspective plan, and then you break it down to your 5-year plan cycle or whatever, and then to your annual budget, and everything is aligned, moving you to a position where competitively you will be globally dominant shipbuilder in 30 years.
Thank you so much, sir. Let me just give you about 2-3 minutes to complete your thoughts on what you were building up last time. And while doing that, I want you to include what we are to expect in the coming days of your, announcements of your launching, so that people will be able to identify with you and how you want the masses of Nigeria to join the third force, as it were, that you are talking about. I know if you can give us names of your leaders, then so that we can juxtapose these names with the names we already have on the list of the two major political parties.
Okay. Well, first of all, I could use a little help from your colleague. There was a second part to her question, which is beginning to escape me now.
Okay,
this was
she was talking about the Constitution.
The what?
The Constitution, the Nigerian
Constitution. Nigerian Constitution, thank you very much. Yes. Thank you, yes. So, I'd more or less covered the first part, the Constitution part I've not got into.
Yes.
Again, there are two approaches to looking at the Constitution. There's no question that the Constitution is flawed in many ways. First, it is flawed in the sense that the Nigerian people did not discuss it and take ownership of it. But it is also flawed in the fact that it is too centralized, because the game has been under the military centralization of power. This whole prebendal thing I talked about. And then the general at the center just hands out prebends to the colonel at the state level and stuff like that. So you rob the country of a fundamental principle of subsidiarity. The rich corpus of knowledge about society that's contained in the social doctrine of the Catholic Church, for example, talks about the principles of subsidiarity and solidarity. Subsidiarity means moving decision-making to levels closest to those people. And the 1979-99 Constitution is very significantly militaristic in the concentration of power at the center, different from the kind of success that people like Chief Abofenaolo achieved. I give you an example of your medium here. Back in the 50s, the National Radio Service made some critical comments on Chief Abofenaolo, and Chief Abofenaolo sought to reply, played games with him, and he decided to, because he had the power as a premier of Western Region, to start his own broadcasting corporation. And then he chose to leapfrog the technology of radio to a new technology that was just emerging, called television. And this is how Ibadan hosted the first television channel in all of Africa. I mean, I grew up, I went to Loyola College in Ibadan in 2016, and I used to remember the pay-off line, WNTV, first in Africa. And Ibadan had TV before Brussels, it had TV before Dublin. And this was what this principle of subsidiarity allowed. In many ways, this is denied the Nigerian people in the current constitution, a significant emphasis on subsidiarity. And so, unfortunately, because people talk so much and think so much about sharing, like I said earlier, and oil, and how much you get, when you mention restructuring, people go, ooh, revenue will take it away from us. No, it is a principle. That principle facilitated the production driven by subnational governments in the 50s and 60s that led to the kind of growth that took Nigeria from literally zero contribution to GDP from manufacturing at the time of self-government to 10% by the time of independence from what the Nigerian political class, like the Chivaolos of this world, and the Oparas and the Sadaunas and Azikiwes and co did. So that's here to bear in mind. Now, taking off, like I said, we're already introducing this conversation. We have a constitution drafting committee, includes Olisa Bakoba, Femi Falana, a number of people. I remember Father George Husseini, Hakim Baba Ahmed, and others. So, next part of the question is, who are the people playing in this effort that we're making? It's a very, very broad spectrum of people. They include some known as politicians, some known as academics, some known as civil society leaders. I've mentioned a few of them already, people like Semi Falano, Lisa Bakoba, Usman Bugaje, who was in the House, people like Tahim Jega, Professor Jega, we've been all the conversations. People like the leaders of the Nigerian Labour Congress, leaders of the GUC, people like leaders of several other civil society organizations. What's interesting, and this is what will shock people, we already have on our list as members of these various groups that are participating 3 times as many people as voted for the president in the last election. We already have that as members. Presidents will they all vote as we suggest? That's part of the work that we're going to do. But do we really have a significant Nigerian population that is significantly committed to the path we're traveling? Absolutely yes. How do we roll to get into them? By the way, there are several significantly acting politicians who are good people, who are governors right now that are part of the group. We may not be dropping names now. It's not the best thing to do. That are part of this initiative.
Thank you so much, sir.
Is a fresh faces.
Thank you so much, sir. We would like to... Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you.
We would like Nigerians to join us,
Okay.
to contribute and ask you questions.
But just before they ask, one quick thing, a number of symbolic things we want to do, starting this weekend.
Yes.
I have sent out a video that we hope will go viral in the next 48 hours, calling on Nigerians. Because the struggle Nigeria is involved in now is a struggle of light over darkness, good over evil. We would like Nigerians, anywhere they are, to gather in small clusters at midnight on Saturday, and then continue to do it any time at night they want for the next week or 2. Gather in a group, wear white over black, and light a candle. And when they light the candle, shake hands in solidarity, lighting a candle because a candle loses nothing when it lights another candle, and brings light to darkness, and sing a song, Nigeria will rise up again. I have the most terrible voice in the world, but let me kind of sing it for you. Nigerians should just embrace this song. Nigeria will rise up again.
Okay.
Nigeria will rise up again. Nigeria will rise up again.
Daybreak. The Daybreak Show.